The courtroom was still that morning, the kind of quiet that made every sound echo. Judge Frank Caprio adjusted his glasses, scanning the next case on the docket. "Laura Miller," he said aloud, his warm tone breaking the silence. From the back of the room, a woman rose slowly, clutching a thin yellow slip of paper in both hands. She moved with hesitation, her eyes darting toward the doors as if afraid of something only she could see. When she reached the bench, Caprio greeted her gently. "Good morning, ma'am. How are you today?" Laura opened her mouth to answer, but her voice faltered. "I'm fine, sir." The words were barely audible, almost a whisper. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded her citation. Caprio tilted his head. "You seem a little nervous. Take your time." She nodded, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The bailiff, standing to the side, noticed too. The sound of the paper crinkling filled the air like static. The judge glanced at her record. "It looks like you've had several parking violations near Jefferson Elementary. This one here says, no parking zone, another says, vehicle left unattended. It's nothing major, but I get the feeling there's more to this than meets the eye." Laura looked down, her lips pressed tightly together. He waited a moment, then said softly, "Ms. Miller, you don't have to be afraid of me. I'm just trying to understand what brought you here." Her eyes lifted, glossy and uncertain. "It's just been hard lately," she said. I didn't mean to break the rules." Caprio leaned back slightly, studying her. "Hard how?" She hesitated again. For a long moment she didn't speak at all. The courtroom, usually filled with quiet chatter and routine business, seemed to hold its breath. Then, with her voice quivering, she said, "It's not the ticket, Your Honor. It's everything else." The words hung in the air like a crack in glass, small, fragile, but impossible to ignore. Caprio didn't interrupt. He just nodded once, signaling her to continue. Laura's eyes flickered toward the courtroom doors again, her throat tightening as she whispered, "I was just trying to get my kids to school on time. It wasn't much. Just one trembling sentence. But somehow, everyone in that room knew this was not going to be an ordinary case." Judge Caprio glanced down at the stack of papers before him. For separate citations, all written within a 2-block radius. Each one told the same story in bureaucratic shorthand. Restricted zone, repeat offense, failure to appear. But the woman standing before him didn't look like someone who didn't care about the law. She looked like someone who'd been running from something. He adjusted his tone, gentle but firm. "Ms. Miller, it seems you've had several tickets in the same area, near Jefferson Elementary, correct?" Laura nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. That's where my kids go to school." The judge leaned forward slightly. "2 children?" "Yes, Your Honor," she said, her voice small. "Daniel is 9, and Mia just turned 6. He smiled faintly. "Beautiful ages." Then, lowering his voice, "You're raising them on your own?" She hesitated before answering. "Yes, sir. It's just me." Caprio nodded, his expression softening. "I can see you've been working hard to take care of them. These tickets, they're all for parking in a restricted zone, right by the school entrance. Why not use the parking lot?" Laura looked down, her thumb tracing the edge of the citation. "Because I can't, Your Honor. The lot's too far from the doors. I can't leave my car where I can't see it." The judge frowned slightly, puzzled. "You can't leave your car?" Her shoulders rose and fell in a shaky breath. "I need to be ready to drive away. I need to be close." The room grew quieter. Even the clerk, typing notes a moment earlier, stopped mid-keystroke. Caprio spoke softly. "Laura, you can tell me the truth. You're not in trouble here. You're safe." She nodded, but her eyes glistened. "Every morning, I park in that same spot because it's the only place where I can see both my car and the school doors. I wait until they're inside, then I drive off fast." "Why so quickly?" the judge asked gently. Laura's lip quivered, but she forced a small smile. "Because they get scared when they see me look back." Caprio's expression shifted, part confusion, part concern. He didn't press further. "So you were just trying to make sure your children got to school safely?" "Yes, sir." Her voice cracked. "They've been through a lot lately. I didn't want them to feel afraid." He nodded, the puzzle beginning to form in his mind. "You said it's just you and the kids. Where's their father?" There was a pause so long that even the hum of the air conditioning felt loud. "He's not around," she finally said, her tone quiet but edged with something heavier than absence. Caprio leaned back, his gaze soft yet searching. "Ms. Miller, I'm not here to judge your life, only your case. But sometimes those two things aren't so separate. If there's more you need to tell me, this is the time." Her fingers tightened around the ticket until it crumpled. She swallowed hard and whispered, "It's not about the tickets, Your Honor. It's about what happens when I stop long enough for someone to find me." The judge's eyes lifted slowly. The audience, sensing the shift, sat in silence. Something inside him knew, this woman wasn't breaking laws. She was trying to survive them. Judge Caprio's eyes softened as he looked at Laura, sensing that every word she hadn't yet said weighed heavier than the ones she had. "Ms. Miller," he said quietly, "whatever it is you're afraid of, I promise you no one in this room will use it against you. You're safe here. Tell me what's really going on." Laura swallowed hard, her fingers twisting around the edge of her citation. "It's not just about parking, Your Honor. It's about not being found." The judge leaned forward, voice calm and patient. "Not being found by who?" She hesitated, her eyes flicking briefly toward the courtroom doors again. Her voice broke as she said the name she had avoided for months. "My husband, well, my ex-husband." She paused, almost choking on the words. "I left him a year ago. He hurt me, Your Honor. For years. And when I finally left, he started following me." The room went still. Even the distant ticking of the courtroom clock seemed to vanish. Caprio's expression changed from curiosity to deep concern. "You mean he's still trying to contact you?" She nodded, tears beginning to form. "He finds me sometimes. He waits near the school near my job. I've changed numbers, moved twice, even changed my car. But he always finds me somehow." The judge's brow furrowed. "And the tickets, you park in front of the school because it's the only way I can see if he's there," she interrupted, her voice trembling. "I can't risk parking farther away. If I see him, I grab the kids and drive off before he can get close. Sometimes I even circle the block before dropping them off. I know it's wrong, but it's the only way I can keep them safe." A murmur rippled through the audience. A few people covered their mouths, others exchanged stunned looks. The clerk's hands froze above the keyboard. Judge Caprio leaned back slowly, absorbing every word. His face reflected a mixture of sadness and restrained anger, not at her, but at what had been done to her. "You said you moved twice. Has law enforcement been involved?" Laura nodded weakly. "They tried, but there's only so much they can do. He hasn't broken any new laws, he just watches. He sends letters. Once he left a toy on my porch. It was one my son lost years ago." Her voice cracked completely and tears spilled freely down her face. "They said it wasn't enough to charge him with anything." Caprio exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening. "Ms. Miller," he said softly, "you don't need to apologize for being afraid. Fear is what happens when someone takes away your peace, not your strength." She wiped her eyes, whispering, "I'm just tired, Your Honor. Tired of running, tired of pretending I'm okay. I just wanted to drop my kids off without feeling like prey." The judge looked at her for a long time, and then down at the stack of parking tickets. He touched them lightly, almost with shame. "These," he said quietly, "are not violations. They're evidence, proof of a mother doing everything she can to keep her children alive." The courtroom remained utterly silent. Even those who had come for other cases stared forward, frozen by the realization that what they were witnessing wasn't a trial, it was a confession of survival. Laura's shoulders quivered as she tried to steady her breathing. The courtroom was silent. No whispers, no rustling papers, just the faint hum of fluorescent lights above. Judge Caprio leaned forward, his hands clasped, his eyes fixed gently on her. "Take your time, Ms. Miller," he said softly. "You're among people who understand more than you think." She nodded, blinking through tears. Her voice was barely audible. "I don't want to make excuses, Your Honor. I just want you to know why I'm like this, why I can't live like other people anymore." Her trembling hands reached into her purse, digging past receipts and folded papers until she pulled out a worn photograph, its edges creased, colors fading. She placed it carefully on the bench before the judge. "This was us," she said. "Before everything changed." Caprio looked down. In the picture, a young woman stood on a beach holding two small children, a boy and a girl, both smiling so wide it was impossible not to feel their joy. Laura's hair blew across her face as she laughed into the camera. It was a photo full of life, full of innocence. "That was 2 years ago," she continued, her voice shaking. "Before my husband started drinking again. Before the nights got loud. Before the walls learned to listen." The courtroom was still as her words filled the air, raw and trembling. "When I finally left, I told the kids we were going on a vacation. I didn't want them to know we were running." Her lip quivered. "We left everything, our house, our clothes, even their toys. I thought leaving would mean we were safe." Judge Caprio looked up slowly, his eyes reflecting a mix of sorrow and disbelief. But he found us, she whispered. He always finds us. So now, she paused, clutching her chest. Now my kids sleep in their clothes every night. I keep their shoes by the door. We practice what to do if we have to run again. My little girl, she's 6, she doesn't even unpack her school bag anymore. A faint gasp came from someone in the audience. The woman sitting in the second row covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Even the officers along the wall looked down, unable to hide the emotion. Laura went on, her voice breaking. When I drop them off at school, I smile and wave like everything's fine. Then I drive to the corner park where I can see the door and I wait. I wait because I'm scared one day he'll show up before I can get back. She looked up at the judge, her eyes pleading, not for forgiveness but for understanding. I know I broke the law. I just didn't want to break my promise. I promised my kids they'd never see him hurt me again. Judge Caprio's face had softened completely. His usual steady posture gave way to something far more human. He removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose, and for a long moment he didn't speak. When he finally looked up, his eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Ms. Miller," he said, his voice trembling, "you have nothing to apologize for. Not here. Not to me. You've carried more than most could bear and you're still standing. That's not breaking the law, that's defying the odds." Laura let out a shuddering breath, as if years of silence had suddenly lifted from her chest. Caprio looked around the courtroom, the officers, the clerks, the spectators. Every single person sat frozen in reverent silence. "You see this woman?" he said quietly. "This is what strength looks like." He placed the photograph gently on the bench beside the stack of citations. "These tickets mean nothing," he continued softly. "But this picture, this story, this love, that's everything." The courtroom erupted in quiet sniffles. A bailiff discreetly wiped his eyes. The clerk reached for a tissue, her hands shaking. Judge Caprio leaned forward again, speaking not as a judge but as a father, as a man. "Ms. Miller, you didn't come here to ask for mercy. You came here carrying proof that mercy still exists." Laura looked up at him, tears streaming freely now, her voice barely holding. "Thank you, Your Honor." He nodded, his eyes wet but resolute. "No," he whispered, "thank you. For reminding us what courage really looks like." And for a moment the entire courtroom seemed to breathe as one, bound by sorrow, admiration, and the unshakable truth that one mother's love had just redefined what justice truly meant. Judge Caprio took a deep breath, his hand still resting on the photograph of Laura's children. The courtroom remained completely silent, every spectator, every officer, every clerk frozen in a collective stillness. For several seconds the judge didn't speak. He simply looked at the picture, then at the trembling woman before him, then back again. Finally, he removed his glasses, folded them carefully, and placed them beside the citation papers. "Ms. Miller," he began quietly, "I've sat on this bench for many years. I've seen people try to lie, I've seen people try to make excuses, but you're not one of them. You've done something far harder. You've told the truth." Laura's eyes filled again, but this time there was a hint of relief behind the tears. He continued, his voice growing steadier. "I see a mother who has been fighting a war every single day, not for money, not for comfort, but for the safety of her children. The law can't always understand what that kind of fight looks like. But justice can." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the courtroom before returning to her. "When laws forget compassion, they become cages. And when people forget empathy, justice loses its soul. What I see here is not a criminal. I see a survivor. I see a protector." The judge reached for the file of parking citations, held it in both hands, and then, to everyone's astonishment, set it aside. "All of these fines are dismissed. Every single one of them," he declared. "You owe this city nothing. You've paid enough in fear, in pain, and in sleepless nights." Gasps and quiet murmurs spread through the audience. Laura pressed her hand to her mouth, her body trembling as if she couldn't believe what she'd just heard. But Caprio wasn't finished. His tone shifted, not as a judge delivering a verdict but as a man making a promise. "I'm also going to reach out to local services here in Providence. There are programs, safe housing, counseling, legal aid, that help women in your situation. My staff will connect you with them today. You won't walk out of this courthouse alone." A soft wave of applause rose from the back rows, but the judge lifted his hand gently to quiet it. "Please," he said, "let's honor her courage with silence. Let's listen to what she's taught us today." He turned slightly toward the courtroom camera, addressing not just the room but everyone who would one day watch this moment unfold online. "Friends, remember this. The law was made for people, not the other way around. Every rule we write, every verdict we give should make the world a little safer, a little kinder. If it doesn't, it's not justice. Then, turning back to Laura, his voice softened once more. Ms. Miller, you've reminded all of us that true strength doesn't come from power, it comes from love. You've done what every good mother does. You've sacrificed everything to protect your children. That kind of courage, that's sacred. Laura lowered her head, her voice barely a whisper. Thank you, Your Honor. I didn't expect this kind of kindness. Caprio smiled gently. It's not kindness, ma'am. It's fairness. And you've earned it. He reached for his gavel, tapping it softly against the bench. Case dismissed, with mercy and with honor. The gavel's echo was followed not by applause, but by quiet tears, a sound that said more than any cheer ever could. In that moment, everyone in the courtroom knew. Justice had spoken, but it had done so through the voice of humanity. Days after the hearing, the city of Providence began to buzz with a story that no one could stop talking about. News anchors replayed the footage on every local station. A trembling mother, a compassionate judge, and a courtroom that witnessed something far greater than a verdict. The clip was shared online thousands of times. Within 48 hours, it had traveled across the country, reaching millions. Under the title, "The Mother Who Made the Judge Cry," comments began flooding in from every corner of the world. People wrote about their own experiences. Women who had escaped violent homes, fathers raising children alone, strangers who said they'd found hope again in humanity after watching that hearing. One message read, "I watched this in silence with my daughter. We both cried. That mother is all of us who ever had to start over." Another said simply, "This is what justice should feel like." Back inside the courthouse, Judge Caprio sat in his quiet chambers long after the lights in the courtroom had dimmed. On his desk, he had placed two things side by side: Laura's dismissed citation folder and a small framed copy of her family photograph, which she'd later mailed to thank him. The picture showed Laura with her children, smiling again, this time without fear in their eyes. He looked at it for a long while, then spoke softly to no one in particular. "Sometimes," he said, "the bravest people who walk into this courtroom aren't the loud ones or the guilty ones. They're the ones who walk in trembling, and still tell the truth." The clerk knocked gently and peeked in. "Judge, we're still getting letters. People are sending donations to help Ms. Miller and others like her. Community groups are asking if they can work with the court to help survivors." Caprio nodded, the faintest smile forming. "Good," he said quietly. "That's how the world should respond, not with punishment but with compassion." He turned off his desk lamp and stood by the window, watching the lights of the city flicker below. In the reflection on the glass, his courtroom appeared behind him, empty, peaceful, and waiting for the next story. "It's easy to hand down a sentence," he whispered. "It's harder to hand down understanding. But that's where real change begins." The narrator's voice carries over, warm yet reflective. "What started as one woman's struggle became a reminder to millions that mercy is not weakness, it's strength in its purest form. Justice without empathy is law, but justice with empathy is healing." The scene fades slowly to the image of Laura walking her children to school, holding their hands. The camera lingers as the sunlight hits her face, and for the first time in years she smiles freely. Friends, if this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to believe that kindness still exists. Because every small act of compassion, every person who chooses to listen, can change the course of another life. And as the music swells softly, the narrator's final words leave the audience with a spark of anticipation. Next time, another case will test the meaning of mercy, when a young boy's mistake brings an entire courtroom to tears. The screen fades to black. The echo of courage lingers long after the story ends.